Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And welcome to yet another Lynn Cullen Live, at least for now. It's April 6th, and it's a beautiful sunny Monday here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, during the plague. Whew. So, guys, it's been 3 days since last we talked, and obviously, a month or two's worth of news, I'll get it out, has happened in the interim, which leaves me always with this: where to start? I'm going to start with some of the things that have made me laugh, because laughter is, God knows, absolutely necessary now. One of you sent me pictures, Ed, that would be you, sent me pictures of the ways some people are self-protecting while going out in public, and some people are extremely funny. Other people are obviously oblivious to feeling embarrassment. The ones I'm thinking of, and the thing I think actually is probably pretty good at being a mask, and that would be the pictures I've been seeing of men, especially men, it's funny, wearing a menstrual pad taped to their, because some of them, I guess now, it's been a long time since I've had to use one, they can just be taped to your underpants, and so they're taped to their faces, and it looks like they would work pretty damn well, and also allow some breathing to happen. I got a mask from the internet the other day, from people sewing them at home, and I wore it, and man, I was walking the dog, and we were walking up some hills, and it was really impeding my ability to breathe. So I kept sort of slipping it off my nose. If there was no one around, I kept slipping it off my nose to get some air and only putting it up when I came upon somebody. I might try a menstrual pad next. I can just get my hands on one. What else? Barbara sent me some cute little things, little statements that people have made. Can I share a few? I used to spin that toilet paper like I was on Wheel of Fortune. Now I turn it like I'm cracking a safe. I saw somebody yesterday when I was walking the dog do a handoff from her car to another woman, and it was a handoff of a large pack of toilet paper. And I almost yelled at her, "Where'd you get that?" or whatever, or "lucky you," or something, and I just thought, oh, shut up. So I didn't do anything. Let's see. Homeschool is going well so far. 2 students have been suspended for fighting, and 1 teacher has been fired for drinking on the job. I can't imagine the toll this is taking on parents with younger children, or for that matter, with sullen teenagers around. Well, you could have helpful teenagers, but if you had me as a teenager, it would definitely have been a sullen one. Let's see. Another homeschooling joke. Day 5 of homeschooling, one of the monsters called in a bomb threat. And I guess that's it. So Speaking of toilet paper, guys, before we get to anything heavy, although toilet paper has been known to be a heavy subject these days as well, but the New York Times published a picture of the patent application of a guy named S. Wheeler. And this application is from 1891. And folks, it's the first roll of toilet paper as we know it. And so this is a schematic rendition of Mr. Wheeler's invention. It's clearly paper, and it's perforated at certain junctures. And I just want to point out this. The roll, as pictured, has the toilet paper coming over the top, which is what I've argued all my life as the way you are supposed to install a roll of toilet paper. It comes over the top. And clearly now I have the inventor himself agreeing with that, because his schematic here, that's what it shows. It comes over the top. Now, believe it or not, this article in the New York Times says that there are people who actually are historians of toilet paper. And I can't imagine there being a ton of them, but there are. As a matter of fact, I had an obit I wanted to share with you today about a guy who, big enough to get an obit in the New York Times, and he was an organic chemist who studied body odor. Can you body odors? So not just underarm odor, what we think of as body odor, but all emanations of an olfactory kind coming off of humans or out of humans. Can you imagine? Maybe I'll share more of it with you in a bit. But one of the things that the article goes into, because the headline is, you don't need that toilet paper, which really isn't true. I mean, most Americans do need that toilet paper. I do not need it. Because I am one of the few Americans who have followed the lead of the Japanese in their manner of cleaning their nether regions. The Japanese, and they're so right on this. I mean, and the article points that out, how there is not a health care expert in the universe who wouldn't agree that the way we clean ourselves with toilet paper is the most extraordinarily unsanitary and environmentally suspect way, and that there are known better ways, but for some reason, and it's probably cultural, almost every other nation refuses to do what the Japanese and I have done. And that is, well, I have a Japanese toilet, is what I have. I got one. All my others are normal. But a Japanese toilet, it does not require, I can't believe I'm telling you this, does not require toilet paper. Because it's like a bidet and a toilet. So it literally shoots water and cleans you off with water, which totally works and works so much better and does not involve, of course, your hands or cutting down forests. So the brand that gets the most attention is called Toto, T-O-T-O. And, if and when this is over, I recommend that you get yourself at least one Toto. They are pricier than a regular toilet, but by the time you you save all that money on toilet paper, and know you're cleaner, for God's sake. Anyway, just wanted to say I have been not hoarding toilet paper at all, and I find myself very, very lucky in that regard. I also must say that when I've had guests and I've asked if they wanted to try to use my Toto, I would say most of them, mostly male and female, have emerged from my bathroom and said with a negative reaction that they found it, whoa, I guess they're not used to having, water squirted. But they've been freaked by it, which I find fascinating. So anyway, just telling you, Toto for later. Although I know plumbers are essential workers, so that is possible. All right. Guys, stop sending me this stuff. People are sending me funny things, and often they're visual, and I can't share. I have to take a drink. Hang on. I'm guzzling. That's water. There's lots of people turning into either great cooks when this, during this time, or alcoholics. I will be the latter for sure, because for one thing, I can't figure out how to, cooking for one is hard enough. I just keep eating the same things over and over again, and I'm starting to get a little nuts about it, but what the hell. All right. Talked about my toilet. That's certainly a very important thing to share with you. God. All right. Shall I wade into some of the heavier stuff? No, wait. I want to share one thing with you first, and then I hope after I do this that some people will maybe call. I have not done this in ages, which is essentially read an entire column to you. Normally I just highlight something that allows me to then, but I think this is so well done that I would like to do almost all of it. This was in perhaps Saturday's New York Times. The opinion writer is Roger Cohen. And here goes. My sister, who lives in London, has been passing lockdown time going through old slides of my father's discovered last year. Every now and then she sends me a grainy or mildewed photograph, a message in a bottle from across the ocean. The pandemic has prompted a universal time of reflection. The past, more present, is the new field of exploration, absent the ability to move. So there we are, my sister and I, still in the cocoon of innocence, happy, curious, with my mother mainly, my father occasionally, my grandparents. Everyone but us in these photographs is now dead. My parents, all those South African aunts and uncles, that world, gone. The dead feel much closer now, along with all those things they lived, the Depression, the war, confinement, the ships that drifted around the world with unwanted people like the Jewish refugees aboard the St. Louis on its voyage of the damned during World War II. That was the ship that the United States turned away, filled with women and children, desperate to save themselves from Hitler. And we turned that ship around, sent them back. Almost all of them were killed. Back to Roger Cohen. The virus teaches something forgotten, and that is what it is like to be swept away by the gale of history. What it is for every assumption to collapse. What is precious in each single breath? It is said the camera never lies, but behind those smiles in my father's slides lay family tragedy. When I researched my grandparents' history in Lithuania and gazed at photographs of the Jewish life there that would be extinguished, I recall thinking as I looked at the pictures, you, sir, are doomed. And you, sitting on that wagon, and you, with your hand on your horse's withers. Again, I digress for a moment. I have often had that same reaction as I have looked at pictures of the shtetls, the ghettos of Eastern Europe, and looking at those faces that look so much like my family. And I have looked at them, at the little girl sitting with her mother, of the father and families, and I've looked at them and thought, you are doomed. And Roger Cohen goes on to say, yet I feel more connection than catastrophe to those people, to my family, to everyone out there now looking backward and inward, sifting memories, adjusting priorities. Less is more. Old recipes revived, old purses reopened and redolent of a grandmother's apartment. Old rhythms of life in a small radius rediscovered. It is the end of an era. The virus kills. To what degree is still unclear. It also screams, you must change your life. The world that emerges from this cannot resemble the old. If this plague, that cares not a whit for the class or status of its victims, cannot teach us solidarity over individualistic excess, nothing will. If this continent-hopping pathogen cannot demonstrate the precarious interconnectedness of the planet, nothing will. Unlike 9/11, this assault is universal. Yet the two most powerful men on earth, President Xi of China and President Trump, have responded with petty national interest that has cost myriad lives. They have failed the world. It's a superpower debacle. China covered up the initial coronavirus outbreak in December for several weeks and then tried to divert attention from this biological Chernobyl through trumpeting its success in containing the illness. Their numbers remain dubious. Offering international assistance and propagating the wild conspiracy theory that the plague did not start in Wuhan but was cooked up in an American military lab and delivered by the United States team attending the Military World Games in Wuhan last October. The lesson is not, as China would have it, that despotic regimes deal more effectively with disaster, but that they incubate the fear that made it impossible for doctors and authorities there to communicate rapidly the scale of the threat. A series of tweets last month from the Chinese embassy in France lauding China's and Asia's superior response due to the sense of community and citizenship that Western democracies lack, was grotesque. Li Wenliang, who died in February, and Ai Fen, who appears to have disappeared, are the whistleblower doctors of Wuhan, whom humanity must never forget. Trump tweeted on March 29th as Americans died, "President Trump is a ratings hit." His daily COVID-19 reality TV show, which he called his coronavirus updates, had an astounding number to him of viewers, more akin to the viewership of a popular primetime sitcom, said the president. Says Roger Cohen, if you want a quick definition of obscenity, there it is. This is the mentality, or rather the mental affliction, that compounded the Chinese cover-up with a Trump-authored American confabulation that lost an entire 6 weeks in dismissal of the pandemic as a hoax. The world is leaderless. It's every country for itself, swirling in lies, schoolyard petulance like Mike Pompeo, the worst American Secretary of State in a long time, insisting on calling this coronavirus the Wuhan virus. It is hard now here in New York, everywhere really, reading the numbers, seeing the triage tents and portable morgues, the millions suddenly without jobs, the people dying alone, discarded blue and white latex gloves on the street, insomnia, choppers over the city at night, the Zoom gatherings that console but also recall that touch is beyond technology, the way people veer away from a passerby, the corona swerve, the sirens, the silence that makes the sirens louder. All this has happened before. Not quite like this, but yes. My sister's photographs are also a memento mori, memento of death. And the world has come through because of people like the surgeon-in-chief at New York Presbyterian Hospital who wrote of COVID-19 patients in a moving dispatch to his medical troops, quote, "They survive because we do not give up." We do not give up. We are connected to one another and to generations past and future. There are no strangers here. That's Roger Cohen. So much of what he said, I found myself wanting to then immediately talk about something else where he said it comes for us all that socioeconomic status, does not protect you, but yes, it does. Yes, it does. I was looking at a map of New York City, and in it they show all the boroughs, then all the neighborhoods in those boroughs, and how many cases of coronavirus are in each neighborhood. And you look, and my God, there's some that just jump out at you, like this one. It's the highest number. It's 947. That's the biggest in all of New York City. It's in Queens, but there are neighborhoods in Queens that have just 49 or 112. Why in the heavens is this one, 947. And it turns out the neighborhood is called, you will not believe this. I'd never heard of it. I've heard of Flatbush. I've heard of Flushing, all nearby. I've heard of Jackson Heights, all nearby. But I have not heard of Corona. Do you believe it? The neighborhood in New York City with the most cases is actually called Corona. And it turns out Corona is not a wealthy neighborhood. It, in fact, is home to a lot of low-income people, and they live close together, and they live often many to the same apartment. It is where immigrants with large families live. They cannot isolate at home. And many of them have the kinds of jobs that are now deemed essential, certain service workers. And so they have to go out into this infected city and come back to their apartments and infect their own families. So I just want to say that looking at this map, it is so clear that the poor are going to pay a higher price. I'm looking at other big numbers. The South Bronx, other places with low income. And then I look at the Upper West Side of Manhattan. 187, 121, not 947. So let us be clear that this is not an equal opportunity infestation. It is not that the rich or the powerful won't get it and or won't succumb, but the poor have so many fewer options to safeguard themselves. And those of us who are able to safeguard ourselves not only need to remember it, we need to do everything we can to help those who have less. I'm going to suggest another possible thing you can do, because people are literally going hungry and will go hungry. There's not a finer nonprofit organization than the food bank. And it is now one of the more essential institutions in our city. So I became this weekend a monthly contributor. You can do it like you would to public radio. That is the most helpful, they say, to have that, constant sort of, they know that if each of you give $5 a month, that is something that they can rely on. I'm just going to throw that out there. You each, I know everybody needs money now, but that's one way to do it, and I think have an obviously positive impact that will help those who do not have the resources that so many of us do. I have a caller. I hope the caller's still there. I'm sorry. Hello? Hi, caller?
Yes, am I online?
You sure are. You're on. Hi.
Wow. I have never called in to anyone, and you are Lynn Cullen, I assume?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't even recognize your voice, although I think I did see you in menopause once, maybe, perhaps. I have so much to say, and wow, I want to thank you for what you said. It was profound beyond. One of the things that everybody has forgotten is the power of the wish, which is prayer, what we would call prayer. But what it really is a power that's heart-centered. I'm a physician, and I went through all this, and I had to finally get out of it, unfortunately, by disability, to discover that, in fact, our heart is a cyclotron. Literally a cyclotron. By physics, I can prove it. And if we can learn to be heart-centered, then we can produce, by our natural production, we can produce what is called love, or in Sanskrit it's called bodhicitta. So the best thing we can really do right now, unfortunately, and it sounds kind of backwards, that we have to sit down and shut up and become heart-centered. And sort of like purify our own selves by wishing good things for ourselves and by wishing positive things for everyone. And the best thing, like Jesus said, pray for your enemies. These are heart-centered things that come like a wish, a true heart-centered thing. It produces a chemical called bodhicitta, which is light, and it's all-pervasive, and it will change everything. We just need a critical mass of it. So we can do this with our heart, okay?
Yes, thank you so much. I
know it sounds kind of weird, but I'm talking about energy and
okay. There's nothing. Okay. I hear you and thank you.
Yes, the power of the wish.
The power of our hearts, the power of love. It's certainly a positive.
Our cyclotrons.
Thank you.
Remember, we really have cyclotrons inside our chest.
All right.
Our brains
thank
are
you.
the office. Our hearts are our home.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. Okay. What? Wait a minute. I'm just doing some emails here, guys. Barbara wants to know about my Toto. Is the water warmed in some way? Yes, dear, it is. The water's not only warm, you can warm the seat. It is so civilized, it's beyond belief. It has different jets for front and aft. You can have it pulse or just simply wash sort of over you. It is all done with this little push button. You never... Yes. You can warm the water specifically to a temperature that you enjoy, not too hot, not too cold. But it's amazing how many people can't stand it. But there you go. I got news for you. It is what we should all be doing. Another one of you has it. Great. It's essentially a bidet, yes, but it's a toilet and a bidet in one. I think we have another caller. Hello, caller.
Hi, Lynn. It's Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
I was calling because you said before that you'd appreciate calls, so I have nothing really in particular. I'm just kind of checking in with you, seeing how your mental health is. If you're like me, where I'm just kind of like a leaf blowing in the wind, not knowing where I'm going, where I'm going to end up or anything. It's
well, you know what? I've always sort of described myself even before this like that. I've never been a real goal-oriented person, and I've never. I always said I have no idea how life took me where it did. I always felt like a leaf on a stream, just being carried along, and I've been a very lucky leaf on a stream. But it was never my intention to do what I'm doing for a living. It was not my intent. Things just, I don't plan ahead very well. So in that regard, I'm doing okay. I have good days, bad days, good parts of days, bad parts of days. I can turn on a dime,
It's funny that you use the leaf in the. I said the leaf like floating around, but it's funny you use the leaf in the stream analogy. I don't know if you've ever read any Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha.
Yeah.
There's a part in there where that's what he talks about, is like being like a leaf in the stream and not trying to grab onto something and hold on, because the current of the stream will just beat you up, and that's kind of, we're both the same on that account,
Just let go. It's a lot about, like, obviously then you and I are not control freaks. I mean, we're more willing to, just let life happen. I'm always, as I said, I'm so stunned always when I bump into a teenager and they say, well, my goal is to this, that. I mean, they've mapped out their lives, and I'm thinking, God, I hope you don't stick to that. I mean, I hope you let life happen.
It's good to have a plan. It's good to have a plan, but you got to be able to adapt too.
Yes, exactly. That's it. You're right.
I went to college thinking that I'd have a good job in some office, and thank God I didn't. I had a job in an office for a little while, but I've, kind of fell into carpentry and painting, and it's actually kept me physically in health, where I'm always moving around and things like that. One of the reasons what kind of prompted me to call, and it's really superfluous, but you were talking about Corona, the little neighborhood in Queens.
Yeah.
A little trivia for you, okay?
Yeah.
The Paul Simon song, me and Julio down by the schoolyard, Goodbye to Rosie, Queen of Corona.
Corona.
That's what
my God, that's it.
And he's from Queens, and, that's what he's referencing. And actually, I think it was either his last concert, because he quit, going on tour. It was either his last concert or one of the closer ones to like the end. He actually did live in a park in Corona.
Wow.
So, little trivia for you there.
Wow. Yes, Corona. I never knew what that meant, Queen of Corona. Now I do. But Corona is suffering more than any other neighborhood. Incredible.
Yeah, and there is a disparity. Some of us, I'll count myself as being more fortunate, but there are a lot of people out there that are really, really suffering. I just thinking, some older people. The other thing, as I was brushing my teeth this morning, it occurred to me that I actually, when I was born, I was closer to the 1918-1919 pandemic than I am to this current pandemic in terms of years. I was never taught about the 1918 pandemic in school. I never, heard about it from like family. The only thing I know about the pandemic is from like PBS, American Experience did something on it. And on Downtown Abbey, there was a little bit about the Spanish flu in the Downtown Abbey. And, and it's so weird. I was looking for something to read, and I picked up a book that I had picked up. I'd never read it before. It was at my mom's house, and it was just a book that had been kind of discarded. I said, I'm going to read this. Upton Sinclair, World's End. And don't you know, I started reading World's End right as this whole thing hit. And it takes place from like 1914 or 1913 on through till about like 1919. And once again, that touches on the, on the Spanish flu is involved in that, and World War I and everything. A lot of strange little coincidences going on here that, I don't know.
My mother always
take note of.
Yeah, my mother always talked about that pandemic, not because, she was born about 3 years after it, 2 or 3 years after it, but she knew of it because her own father got the flu, and that flu killed young men his age a lot, killed young people, as opposed to this one, which does, obviously, they both kill anybody, but that was the age group that got taken down the most, or 20 to 40. And he survived. But later in his life, when he got Parkinson's disease, some doctor told him that he was seeing a lot of people who had survived the flu, the pandemic, and now have in their old age Parkinson's. So my mother,
there might be some kind of like analogical connection there.
Who knows? My mom always conflated it and said that she thinks that while he survived the flu, it did later give him. But who knows? I mean, that's unproven. But that's why I had known of it. And I also, one of the reasons there's not a lot of stories about it or movies is because Americans, it was not something people wanted to remember. People, a lot, it was so horrific, and people did not necessarily behave well.
Want to tell that story, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah,
and so it just got buried. It's like sometimes people coming home from war do not want to talk about it. And that was
right.
the general reaction in America. You bury it. So
what's
that's
so weird about this is you hear stories of like some guy in Italy, I think he was 102 years old. He had actually had the Spanish flu, and now he got the coronavirus, and he survived both. And then yet there's this young, healthy athlete, you know, in the prime of their life, and they get it and it hits them. It's just so weird. I don't know about you, but with me, like, I go to the little local market once a week because I order special bread from them. But it's just so weird. It's like anything I touch, even my own car or anything, I just feel like everything I touch is weird.
Everything you touch could kill you. That's what you think. And everybody, when I'm walking my dog who like doesn't, you know, give way or, you know, I look at them like, you're going to kill me. You know, it's like, and they're looking at me in the same way. It's awful. I'd rather just stay home, you know, and I see that there are some.
That's what I've been doing.
Well, there are some, I would if I didn't have the dog. There are some countries that I read today that do not even allow dog walking, which begs the question, doesn't it?
Hey, did you see the thing Did you see the thing, the tiger in the Bronx
The tiger in the zoo, yeah.
What does that tell us now? That is,
well, it doesn't necessarily tell us anything. I mean, they're going to make it through. No one's gotten it from them. They did pass it among themselves, these tigers.
Well, what I wonder is like how this virus is mutating. That's what makes me wonder about it.
Well,
you know,
I don't know.
Oh, God.
This is the speculation of folks who don't know. Yeah.
All that I can say is what everybody else is saying. Stay safe. Take care of yourself. I love you. Love your audience. And I will be in touch. And I guess after you get done with the show, we can look at the birds tweeting, you know, and the flowers.
That's right.
At the very least.
Right. So, I love you too. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Jeez, you guys. We have another caller. Hello.
Hey, Lynn, is it me?
Yes, it's you.
Good morning. Hey, you were starting to talk about that the Spanish flu. I'll give you a couple of more mind pictures to contemplate about that. My dad was born in 1918, and he was one of 18 children born to the same parents. They were first generation German immigrants. They lived 3 doors up from what is now the Ohio River Boulevard, you know, Route 65 in Bellevue. That's where my family is from. And where Uncle Dougie spent his last days, by the way, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
And so of course I had growing up lots of older aunts and uncles that were older than my dad, and I remember my aunts telling me stories about when they were now this is of course when Ohio River Boulevard was nothing more than basically a dirt road, right?
Yes.
They would sit up in their 3rd floor bedrooms, and of course they were all packed in this small house, you can imagine. But I remember vividly my aunts describing looking as they would look out, they were quarantined, as they looked out down onto the Ohio River Boulevard, they would just watch parades of horse-drawn carriages stacked up with baby caskets. Caskets of babies that, of course, just died in infancy. And she said they were just, they were loaded so high, they always thought that the carriage was going to tip over at some point. And that's what they watched, for months and months at a time.
Wow.
And they just, and again, many of those 18 children that were, that my dad's siblings, of course, quite a few of them actually died in infancy as well, not necessarily because of the flu, because, infant mortality in those days was even higher than it is today. But at any rate, I just thought you would.
That's amazing.
You would appreciate that imagery, and
yeah.
When we think about comparing, in some ways, how bad we have it to what other generations have lived through, maybe it seems a little bit quite not so bad for us. You know what I mean?
Perspective, yes.
Right.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
That's all I had for you.
It's wonderful. Thank you. You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye. I'm also thinking about his dad's mom, 18. She gave birth to 18. Jeez, God. My Lord. Mary sent me a story about a Toto, like my toilet. I have a funny Toto story, she said. My husband and I took a group trip to Japan a few years ago. Shortly after we arrived in Tokyo, the ladies of the group lined up at the closest women's room. One poor jet-lagged lady, a few people ahead of me in line, was next for the stall, and all of a sudden she started screaming. She adjusted her clothing and slammed out of the stall with water squirting out of the toilet all over her clothing. She must have pushed the wrong button on the controls. None of the rest of us were used to the Totos either, so we all went and found a different ladies' room in case there was some major plumbing explosion going on in that first one. That was my introduction to a major cultural plumbing difference. Well, the article that I read about the toilet paper and the Totos said that it really, there's a lot of cultural resistance, not just in the United States, but all over to what the Japanese have invented. And I'm sorry, guys, it's a better mousetrap. I don't understand why people, wouldn't embrace it. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get on. Chuck writes, is it my imagination or has your audience grown exponentially like the virus over the last month or two? Just wanted to say how much I love hearing all these new voices. It reminds me of the old days. It does. I mean, a lot of people who remember the old radio show are getting echoes of it, right? To everyone, please keep it up. We need each other right now. There we go. Chuck, I'm leaving your last remark unsaid. So I think I have, hang on. Wait a minute. I have another. Amy, is there another caller? I'm getting mixed up here. If there is, speak up. Hello? I don't think there is.
Hello?
Oh, there is. Hi.
Hey, I was going to call about Spanish flu, but that last caller reminded me my grandfather was in the same situation, except his mother gave birth to 24 kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we can one-up each other. But
what the hell? You haven't. I can't even. That is. And how long did that woman live?
I don't know. This was long before I was around, so I
Jeez.
don't know more about that. But especially, I know, like you said, most of them did not live. I think 8 of them lived. So that's. So everything about that sounds terrible. This always comes up in those conversations about vaccines and stuff like that too. And in my West Virginia days, I would every once in a while stumble into these rural graveyards, the family plots with these.
Yes.
With the little tiny
yes.
stones marked, out at the edge that had no markings on them. They would just be little tiny rocks, and I assume those were all the kids that didn't live.
Yeah.
But I don't really know that. I mean, you can also mildly interesting. When I was a student in college, we did an exercise where you could go to the cemetery, and if you looked before a certain, I don't remember how we did that, but if you looked at graves, we would go to the cemetery there by your house. I can't remember. The big one there. Homewood Cemetery.
Yeah.
But regardless, we would go to Homewood Cemetery, and all the students would walk out across the graveyard, and you could mark down the ages of the people, and you could graph them out and see how the children didn't live, even in there. And I would assume if you had a stone that was marked in Homewood Cemetery, you were not a poor kid, I'm assuming.
I would assume that too.
Right.
I walk often in cemeteries, and I'm always doing the math. And a lot of people, way back when, lived long lives, and then but I think surviving your infancy was a big issue. I mean, once you maybe made it out of childhood, you had a pretty good shot. And I think why the life expectancy was so low is all those babies dying.
Right. No, that was that's what the exercise we were doing at school was you could graph it out, and there used to be a big peak in death rates for humans at very young, and then again when you're very old, of course.
I'll tell you another graveyard story that just freaks you out is the cemetery way up on the hill in Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
And oh my God, row after row after row of entire families, and all the same date over and over again of the flood. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, it would be pretty mind. I haven't had it. I've been to Johnstown. We went a couple of years ago with the intention of going to the museum for the flood and stuff, but then it just so happened we had bought train tickets, and it was the same day as a huge snowstorm 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, right.
So the train was the most on-time train I've ever ridden for Amtrak, but everything else was closed. There was no way to get up there to the top of the hill. I think even the incline there was closed.
Right.
So we weren't able.
Bad timing there, huh?
Yeah.
Bad timing.
So before I hang up, though, I was remembering in all this conversation the first time I had ever heard of the Spanish flu. This is far less pleasant. It was back in the 90s. I was in an argument with a guy while we were drinking. This was kind of still in the early days of AIDS, and there was a conspiracy theory out there that AIDS was not a big deal.
Yeah.
And the conspiracy theorists then were comparing it to the Spanish flu, and that was the first time I had ever heard anybody ever mention it, and saying that the Spanish flu was way worse, which again kind of reminds me of all the conspiracy arguments now, which is crazy in and of itself.
Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But
anyway.
Thank you for calling.
You for being
I
on the
appreciate
air.
it. Well, you are welcome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
It occurs to me that one of my favorite books, and it's a little one, is a book by Pittsburgh historian David McCullough. And he wrote a book that's simply titled, I believe, The Johnstown Flood. And man, that thing reads like a page-turner novel. It is just amazing. He brings the horror, the lives, everything, alive. And if you have a way to download that or access it, I really recommend it. It's a great read. Oh God, I'm loath to get into some of this negative stuff, but the last caller mentioned, the craziness of some people still refusing to acknowledge the what is happening. And I just want to apologize one more time. My dog keeps dropping his bone, and it's okay. And it's one thing if you're just a regular idiot who refuses to understand what is happening and what your responsibilities are. But man, it is another thing if you are the governor. If you are the governor of a state, and these guys, and they're almost all Republicans, and they're I do want to, before I start ragging on all the Republican governors, I do want to immediately acknowledge the fact that two of the more impressive governors I have noted during this are the Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, and unbelievably to me, the governor of the neighboring state of Ohio, Mike DeWine, whose career I have often followed, and I could not stand the man because I don't agree with him politically at all. And yet he, in this crisis, has been the first of many governors to take pretty extreme measures. He's been out in front of all the others. And so while I can't stand the guy's politics, I tip my hat to his leadership in this moment. And you are seeing that we have a lot of politicians in positions where leadership is one of the job requirements, and they are totally inept, incapable, and in some cases willfully so. The governor of Florida, for God's sake, the governor of Georgia, of Tennessee, the governors of some of these states, just unbelievable. Here's the governor of Tennessee, a statement he made. This was just a few days ago. He said, wait a minute, I got to find it because it was just so mind-blowing to me. How come I can't find it? He said this. It is deeply, this is on March 30th, so what was that, 5 days ago? I forget what the date is. It's a week ago. He said he was refusing to close anything down a week ago, and he said this: it is deeply important that we protect personal liberties. Now, that's the American ideal, the American exceptionalism, our embrace of exactly that, our right individually to do whatever we damn well please, and our inability to understand that there are times when, in fact, that cannot be allowed, that the good of the whole would supersede your right to do what you want to do. The fact that there are governors with the ability to impose upon people, or in fact presidents with the ability to impose upon people restrictions in this America, but who refuse to do so because of their fealty to this ideal of American freedom. They're killing people. They are killing people. And so, hearkening back to the piece that I read from Roger Cohen, when he said, if this experience does not teach Americans solidarity over individualistic excess, then nothing will. And I fear it's a lesson that some people simply cannot learn. That same governor eventually actually did issue an executive order. I guess it was a day later, shutting down non-essential businesses. And then it took him more and more days to ask people to stay home. Meanwhile, the neighboring state of Kentucky, which has a Democrat as the governor, how the hell that happened, I don't know, is desperately trying to keep the citizens of his state from venturing over the border into what will become the hot spot of Tennessee. But of course, he's doing that because he knows that the virus doesn't care about borders. But if people stop traveling, then the virus cannot cross those borders. And it is these same Southern governors that refuse to expand Medicaid. And these states, which has refused to close down, and they have poorer populations, they did not expand Medicaid. You have a perfect storm gathering. And a writer who lives in one of these hellholes said, "What does it mean to live through a pandemic in a state with a high number of uninsured citizens, where many counties don't have a single hospital, and where the governor delayed requiring people to stay home?" Well, all across the South, we are about to find out. Again, some of the reality here. This pandemic is exposing a lot of the structural disadvantages that lower income people face, right? Their lack of job security, their uneven access to health care, the fact that they might live in very close proximity to a lot of other people. So we are seeing played out in real time the divide, the haves and the have-nots in this country now. The outbreak is still new enough that the relationship between socioeconomic status and infection these numbers are not yet determined, but as I said, that one map I saw in the New York Times clearly shows it. Your own intelligence would bring you there. And these are also the people that are the grocery cashiers and the stockers and the drivers and the people who are most at risk, who get paid the least and now are considered essential. As I said last week, I didn't see many hedge fund managers being called essential. And Congress, well, because of the Senate, Mitch McConnell. None of the legislation that has been passed that is supposed to help the least of us, these essential workers, those guys, these workers are going to get the same stimulus checks that other people are going to get. People who really don't need it, they aren't going to get an extra bonus. Democrats are renewing their push to include in the next bill occupational safety requirements for these essential workers. They're calling for hazard pay for these people on the front lines. And that stuff didn't get anywhere, the last bill. Didn't get any traction at all, with Pelosi trying desperately to talk to Mnuchin because the President of the United States will not talk to the leader of the House. And the Republicans continue to say, no, no, no. They're killing people. Did you see that one of the reasons the federal response is so is so horrific is because apparently Jared Kushner is in charge? You thought Mike Pence was? I don't know. See, that's part of the problem. You got Mike Pence doing his thing, but then you got Jared Kushner apparently doing his. And a lot of senior advisors around the White House say, you got to get to Kushner to get anything done. Forget the coronavirus task force. So you got Trump up there blaming the states for not having enough ventilators. And then you have Kushner. Did you see what he said? I'll give you the quote. The notion of the federal stockpile was it's supposed to be our stockpile. It's not supposed to be the state's stockpile. They have stockpiles that they are supposed to use. So they're blaming the governors. I got news for you guys. Whatever stockpiles they are, we paid for them. And there ain't much in those stockpiles because we've been led by fools and incompetence. And we have got the biggest fool in American history now in charge. A guy who stands there with the Surgeon General who has just urged all Americans to cover their faces when they go outside, and then Trump says, I'm not going to do it. I mean, how do you even... I really don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for all of us. I really am. I didn't even see I'd gone over so long. I'll keep going for a little while. Okay. Okay. Barbara, stop sending me those things during the show because then I look at them and I can't share them. I love them, but do it afterwards. Okay. Oh, the county has just sent out its update, its COVID-19 daily update. Let me give you the numbers. And you know these are low. These are low. We don't have a clue. You have to assume that Allegheny County has well over 1,000 cases, but the number we know is 642. And now 4 deaths. And unlike the rest of the world, women are slightly more. 51% of the cases are women. 49 are male. And that is not the case normally. Not that that's a huge difference. And the largest demographic group of positive cases continues to be those 25 to 49 years old. What else I got for you? Oh, God, Captain Crozier. Jesus H. Unbelievable. Okay, so, yeah. The guy who spoke truth to power, the guy who tried to safeguard his troops, his sailors, has, of course, lost his job and destroyed his career in caring for his people, which will have him go down in history as a great leader. The current acting Secretary of the Navy will not. He says that the Captain Crozier created a perception that the Navy is not on the job, that the government is not on the job. No, you're wrong, you friggin' idiot, Modley. It's not a perception. The Navy was not on the job in reality. And that's why the captain desperately tried to reach anybody who would help. And you worry that Captain Crozier has created a perception that the government is not on the job? Oh, yeah. We now have a Navy, and a commander-in-chief who pardons and lauds and parties with people who broke every rule. The Navy SEAL, who Trump pardoned, he's been to Mar-a-Lago. He's a pal of Trump's now. The guy who knifed a kid to death, who I can't even, and Crozier is the one who gets tanked. Well, I want to read you a historical tidbit that is really amazing. This comes to us from a guy named Tweed. Oh, God. Imagine naming your kid Tweed. Tweed Roosevelt. Yeah, and he is one of those Roosevelts. His great-grandfather was Teddy Roosevelt, who, as you know, commanded the volunteer cavalry regiment, the Rough Riders, during the Spanish-American War. And the Rough Riders were in Cuba. And they had been extraordinarily successful. The Battle of San Juan Hill had been fought and won, and the war was basically over. Unfortunately, though, the soldiers were still deployed in Cuba. And there was a yellow fever and malaria epidemic. And more of them were dying from these diseases than died in battle. And the commanders in the field, including Teddy Roosevelt, kept telling Washington, we need to bring our soldiers home. But the leadership in Washington, particularly a jerk named Russell Alger, who was the Secretary of War, refused. The Career Army Office, I will read the rest of what Roosevelt's great-grandson writes. The career Army officers who did not want to risk their jobs by being too outspoken were stymied. Roosevelt, though, as a short-term volunteer, had less to lose. So with the tacit approval of his fellow commanders, he wrote a fiery open letter and released it to the press. The letter was printed in virtually every newspaper in the country, creating an uproar, demanding that the soldiers be brought home immediately. And the Secretary of War then, of course, relented, and the troops were sent home to quarantine on Long Island at Montauk Point. Hundreds of his men had died of disease in Cuba. But Roosevelt's action outside the chain of command undoubtedly saved countless more lives. Roosevelt paid a price. The Secretary of War was furious that Roosevelt made him, essentially, look like a bad guy. And so even though Roosevelt had been nominated and expected to receive a Medal of Honor for his role with the Rough Riders, the Secretary of War shot down the nomination. Tweed Roosevelt says this: "In this era, when so many seem to place expediency over honor, it is heartening that so many others are showing great courage, some even risking their lives. Theodore Roosevelt in his time chose the honorable course. Captain Crozier, now the former captain of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, has done the same." Isn't that amazing? The irony of Crozier captaining a ship named after Teddy Roosevelt, who did essentially the exact same thing that got Crozier fired. It's amazing. So, I think, Amy, oh God, I am sorry. Are there any callers there? I guess we have callers. I'm sorry, I was going on too long. Is there a caller there? Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
I forgot what I was going to talk about.
Well, you could save it for tomorrow when you remember.
Oh, no, it's coming back. No, what you're saying about like people dying and these Republicans still aren't getting it. I mean, I thought it was bad when people were getting shot up and kids were getting shot up in schools.
Yeah.
And they weren't getting it then, and they're still not getting it. So what the hell? But and Jared talking about these are ours. Aren't
unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.
And the other thing, there is a lot of ignorance because, like you, we have a cleaning woman who comes in twice a month, every 2 weeks, and we told her to stay home. We'll pay her, and she was talking to my wife this morning and just saying, "Well, I don't understand what the big deal is. There's the flu kills more people." I'm like, oh gosh, what news is she reading?
Yeah, there you go.
And
you see, there's already a lawsuit. There's already a lawsuit against Fox News from a group saying that you spreaded false information during a national emergency. You have cost lives. I don't know that that's going to necessarily get anywhere, but you know what? They are costing lives. They have cost lives, all those right-wing blowhards. And it is amazing that they will be able to, skate by once this is over? I sure as hell hope not.
But I didn't know that until you just told me that. But even if it goes nowhere, it's bringing awareness to some degree. And maybe even Fox News is going to, Sean Hannity will go on at night crying about they're getting sued. It's so unfair. At least it may make some people think. I don't have too much hope for that.
Listen. If you're still thinking that some people are going to think who listen regularly to Sean Hannity, no. They don't. They can't. I don't know why. They're so invested that they'll literally go down with the ship. I don't know. But they're killing they're taking a lot of other people with them, and it's just mind-blowing.
Well, my wife, she grew up in a rural area. Her mom still lives there. She lives out in Bedford County. And she's telling me, people are still out and about here. And which doesn't surprise me because I know that demographic out there because we visit there frequently. And I was watching the local news this morning talking about that people contracting more cases and update on the number of deaths in Western Pennsylvania. I'm seeing a disproportionate amount of people, when you talk about per capita, that in the rural counties, they're getting it more because my belief is they perceive it's a city problem.
Urban thing, yeah,
and
sure.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know.
I know. And they have fewer medical facilities, and I don't know. It's going to get ugly. It's going to get really ugly. So batten down the hatches. I think I have another caller. I'm not sure. So Roger, I got to run. Okay? I'm not
all right. Have a good rest of your day. It's beautiful.
Okay, you too.
Try to get out.
Okay.
Right, bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. Oh, wait. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't keeping up. Amy says no. And anyway, guys, it's pretty dang late here. I'll share this with you, and then I'm saying goodbye. Because I actually do have a bunch of stuff I have to do today. This is disgusting. This is beyond disgusting. Okay. The acting Secretary of the Navy, Thomas Modly, blasted the now ousted commander of the USS Theodore Roosevelt as stupid in an address to the ship's crew this morning. Unbelievable. The crew that cheered him. And by the way, are you aware that Captain Crozier now has the virus? He does. He's sick and in quarantine. This is the acting Secretary of the Navy. He told the crew that their former commander, Brett Crozier, was either, quote, too naive or too stupid to be in command. While Modly, it says here, has publicly refrained from accusing Crozier of leaking the letter to the media, in his address to the ship's crew, he accused him of committing a betrayal and creating a big controversy in Washington. See, these are people this is a guy who's just covering his ass, trying to cover, the Secretary of Defense's ass. These guys care more about protecting themselves than protecting their men and women. More words from this idiot. It was a betrayal. And I can tell you one other thing, because he did that, he put it in the public forum, and it is now a big controversy in Washington. So that's his mistake. Yeah. But Washington started doing what he asked them to do after he did what he did, exactly like the way Theodore Roosevelt played it back in the 1898 or whenever the hell that was. Oh, my God. Here's more of his words, the exact words. If he didn't think, in my opinion, that this information wasn't going to get out to the public in this day and information age that we live in, then he was either A, too naive, or too stupid. He forgot B. A, too naive, or too stupid to be a commanding officer of a ship like this. The alternative is he did it on purpose. It was a betrayal of trust with me, with his chain of command. When asked if Modley's personal attack on Crozier was appropriate, a senior defense official said today, "I don't know what to say." Wow. 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 Incredible. Okay. Well, that's your Trump administration at work. And God help us all. Okay, guys, have a safe day. Hope you can get out in that sun and avoid all the other people. Okay? I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.